relying on social meteorologists for weather information, how the forecast can go terribly wrong, why relying on non-experts is not the best thing to do, and getting the most from your insurance when Mother Nature takes a swipe at your home, understanding how the world of insurance works. This is NTWC Live. And good morning and welcome to NTWC Live. We are coming live to you from all around the country. San Antonio is our base spot where we've got Bill Reed over in Houston. We have Hal Needham sitting over in Galveston, and our guests are around the country. We want to make sure that we let you know that this whole program, all season long, is made possible by some wonderful folks. USAA being one of them. They've been supporting our program since day one, and they continue to do so. Not only this, but the National Tropical Weather Conference as well. South Padre Island Convention and Tourist Bureau, also big sponsors helping us out with the conference and with our podcasts as well. And the Weather Company. You know, we all throughout the country, you see weathercasters using this type of software from the Weather Company. It brings up their graphics that you see, the animations and the movement, even that big, wonderful 3D thing the Weather Channel uses. That's the Weather Company for you, and we thank them for their support. And the Weather Boy. Weather Boy's been wonderful. They've come on the last couple of 3 or 4 years, and they are supporting students coming to our conference. So they actually get out there, they perform a conference with them, and they've got a nice little conference contest going on, so sweepstakes. We call it Trip to the Tropics, where seniors and sophomores and even freshmen and others who are really majors in meteorology can sign up to go for a free trip to the National Tropical Weather Conference, courtesy of the Weather Boy. So thank you very much for that. So without much further ado, let me see if we can turn this over to Bill Reed for a tropical update, and we'll go from there. Bill?
Thanks, Alex. And all of a sudden, the activity in the tropics has gotten a little quieter from the last couple of weeks, where we've had quite a number of items to talk about. Stay tuned to us for a show somewhere down the road, probably next year, for a in-depth recap of Otis and the failed forecast of Otis, both by models and humans. So we're going to stick with the current weather today. This is the wide view. A lot of convection still down in the Caribbean. Tammy has gone extra tropical. This ball of convection, here's what's called a warm seclusion. There's some interest in that maybe getting detached from the front and having a chance to go again. We'll see. And then we have this area of weather that's moved off of Central America, part of which was TD21 that went into Nicaragua. Let's see. A closer up view of post-tropical Tammy. You can still see it's a well-defined circulation down low, but the big dry slot and cooler, drier air in the frontal band wrapping around into the center of the now post-tropical system in there. And this has been a forecasting challenge all along, as steering currents aren't well-defined, and the models haven't been very helpful after just the shortest period of time of having some accuracy. Basically, what they're saying is that the system's going to be trapped down there for the foreseeable future, which is the 5-day forecast. In the Eastern Pacific, there actually is a system further west, but is only given a 20% chance of developing. And our system off Central America and south of Mexico is given a high chance of developing probably over the weekend. A little closer view of that, and you can make out, if you look carefully at the lower level clouds underneath, south of the ball of convection here, as you can get a sense of some broad circulation in this. So it's already a broad low down there, but it's not focused around any particular center yet that I could tell. As far as its future goes, as has been the case for forever now, the track guidance is all over the place, but we don't have a well-defined center, or apparently in the longer term, a well-defined steering current. So that still has to play out. And intensity, you don't want to pay too much attention to it when it hasn't even developed yet, but it's, again, at least showing some interest in becoming a tropical storm and maybe even a hurricane as we get out further in time. There we go. On the ensembles this morning, this is 240 hours worth of the European ensembles. It shows the bifurcation, if you will, some going west, some going east, with what is post-tropical Tammy, with the eastern solutions developing it back into a hurricane, and the western ones just fading it away. There is some interest in the models in the Western Caribbean, which is the time of year when you would expect the only part of the basin that you really expect the potential for development. And it's showing at least something worth paying attention to, but nothing you can hang your hat on yet with the European. And the GFS really is in pretty much the same mode, maybe even a little noisier down in the Caribbean, but nothing, again, well-defined where you can hang your hat on it. Most likely, this is from looking at the details, there's two potential areas in the model, one further south that affects Nicaragua, Honduras, and the other one further north up towards Jamaica and Cuba. So here we are with the tropical update. I got a black screen.
All right, there we go. All right, Hal, you're up.
Nobody's home. Okay, Hal, how about it? What's going on with you?
Thanks for the feedback there. I'm always amazed. A lot of times we start letting our guard down in late October and November, and it's amazing, especially how much the Caribbean can stay in play even through early mid-November. Thanks for the update there today. Well, y'all, a GeoTrek update from us. GeoTrek explores the world looking for stories related to extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. I know we often talk about our podcast. We usually have either the #1 or #2 ranked podcast on the topic of natural disasters. You got to check out the podcast we just uploaded this week on Tuesday. It's a look back at Hurricane Ian a year later. We interviewed professional experts, Matt Devitt, he's chief meteorologist at Wink TV in Fort Myers. Also, Casper and Kylie Gregory from the Tropical Weather Threat Society came in the broadcast as well. You're really going to enjoy this look back at lessons learned, really what were the impacts, and how Southwest Florida doing as they recover from the impacts of Category 4 Hurricane Ian impact last year. So that's new wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that. You'll be able to find the GeoTrek podcast. That's GeoTrek. We often talk just about the podcast, but we also do a lot on social media. You can follow us on Facebook. We have a group called GeoTrek the Community. We're also on TikTok, where we do a lot of reels, and we'll actually take video clips from our podcast. We'll make those reels, and then I try to do live videos usually twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays, just to talk about the week ahead and the weekend up ahead, what's happening as far as extreme weather and natural disasters around the world, around the country, and usually a look at what's happening along the Gulf Coast region as well. Finally, I wanted to talk about conferences. We have great conferences coming up in 2024. Obviously, you got to check out NTWC, our live conference there in South Padre Island, the first week of April next year. A lot of us that are on the show, all of us that help host the show will be there. And then a lot of our speakers that you see throughout the year will be there in South Padre Island. It's, a 1 hour flight or so from Houston, pretty easier to get to than a lot of people think, and a great conference venue there. It's going to be a lot of fun. And also check this out. We have a conference coming up in early January that's sponsored by my parent company, CNC Catastrophe and National Claims. The conference is called CNC Connect. It's in Mobile, Alabama from January 8th to the 10th. Today on the broadcast, we're going to be talking a lot about insurance. If you want to learn more about really insurance policies, insurance risk pricing, even what it's like to work as an adjuster, what are opportunities out there, come to CNC Connect January 8th to the 10th. There's going to be a lot of adjusters there and a lot of opportunities to grow professionally. I'm going to be there. Phil Klotzbach is going to be there. We're going to have a lot of experts from the insurance industry and extreme weather industry. It's going to be a great conference. You can go to cncconnectconference.com and you can still get early bird tickets for just $99, VIP for $199. Again, that's January 8th to the 10th. If you live in a northern state, come on down to the Gulf Coast and do a little bit of golf. We're going to have a Top Golf social and things like that. It won't be snowing in Mobile in January, I'll tell you that. So that's really everything going on with GeoTrek. And we may be doing a little bit of international travel as well as we get towards later in this year. We'll have to keep you up to date with that, but we want to expand the podcast and social media to include extreme weather around the world. So that's everything from GeoTrek. Bill, back to you over there in League City, Texas.
Okay. Yeah, we've had a One thing I forgot to talk about when you mentioned the busy November, October, one of the factors I think that has made the last several years active throughout the end of the season. Normally an El Nino shuts it down early, but the much warmer than normal water, it's still running, the Caribbean's still running more like September temperatures than late October.
Well, wasn't it several years back? I think there was a November hit in Nicaragua. Wasn't it a Cat 4? I think they had maybe 2 Cat 4s in a year, but I think one of them, maybe Ida or something like that, was a huge hit there in November. It was definitely a major hurricane strike.
Yeah, the names blend together on me, but they had back-to-back seasons with major hurricanes down there, late season. And that's when you do have a late season, when the most memorable I remember was a late October storm called Mitch back in 1998, I believe it was, and deepened rapidly to a Category 5 over water weekend before it made landfall, but then it stopped moving for several days, and the awful flooding killed thousands of people down there.
Yeah, it just stalled out really over Honduras, right?
Yes. Even down in the Costa Rica had severe flooding in the northern part of Costa Rica after that.
And some of the rainfall totals were like 30, 40 inches or something, insane amounts of rain in those mountainous areas, I think.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me if it was really a lot higher than that. There's not that many rain gauges there now, but there was much less. One of the positives that came out of that was several of the countries put together a bit of a hydrologic automated observing system. So they have flood gauges on the most dangerous streams and rainfall reports.
I see, for better prediction, because I think most of the fatalities were from rainfall runoff.
Yeah, that's it's not the sexiest part of a hurricane, but that's the part that's killing a lot of people almost year in and year out.
Yeah, especially Central America, Caribbean area. You get those mountainous areas. You don't even need as much rain, right? And all of a sudden you have a lot of mudslides and flooding.
Yeah, and the terrain's so steep there in portions of Honduras where the loss of life was really bad. The only flat land is right down along the riverbeds. So once the floods get going, they're trapped.
Yeah, that's true. Do you know, Bill? I know obviously NHC does forecasts for the whole basin. Will they do a lot of specialized forecasting getting into, say, Central America, like as far as impacts?
It's pretty, I mean, the basic parameters like heavy rain, surge, wind are forecast exactly the same for down there as they are for the States. That's part of our job, our mission there that we're supposed to do. As far as the impacts, that's up to the local meteorological organizations of the states. And that's important to do it that way to avoid differing forecasts going out from official agencies and keeping the message straight.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. You're doing a lot of the meteorology the same, but maybe the impacts are aligned more with what the local messaging.
Right, and to some extent we do that. It mirrors what we do here. The local impacts are much better handled through the local weather offices. It'd be impossible. I mean, think about it. You got hundreds, if not thousands, of counties that are in the hurricane country zone. For one forecaster to actually know what the geography is going to play out as in the impacts is not something that you could do. Maybe a job for AI in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you can have local people that have that knowledge of the landscape, they're going to be able to interpret that forecast a little better.
Yeah.
Bill, you mentioned hurricane country. Is Will with us now, I think, to talk about the book? Will we be able to introduce him? Or yes. I don't know if we're ready for that part of the broadcast yet.
I am here.
Excellent. Hey, okay. Hal, you take it away from here.
Yourself.
Questions.
Sure. Will, it's a pleasure to have you on the broadcast today. We're really excited to learn from your perspective on on contracting and building and insurance and this amazing book that you've put together. We're so excited to talk with you about hurricane country. Let me introduce you, and then I think we're going to have a lot of questions for you because the work you've done is so practical and so applied. So Will Henderson, Will was a general contractor who specialized in roofing, and then he became interested in insurance adjusting. He's been a licensed independent adjuster for 19 years, working insurance claims in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, among many other states. He's also an author, and we're going to talk today about his book called Hurricane Country. Will, welcome to NTWC Live.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I apologize for the technical difficulties of the video, but I'm here ready to talk.
Well, the good thing, Will, we can hear you loud and clear. And I think people are really going to be excited for this interview because you've done a lot of great work. Could you tell us a little bit about this book, Hurricane Country, just what inspired you to write it?
Well, the last few years of my career, I'm retired now. The last few years of my career, I spent a lot of, I was actually after Hurricane Ida, I spent a lot of time the following year doing supplements, which is where the insureds submit stuff to pick up extra money after the original payments. And I saw so many insureds and contractors that had no idea what was going on after a hurricane hit and how they should handle the problems that they have and work with their insurance company and their adjusters. So I thought this would be a good opportunity. Now that I'm retiring, I can write this book, get it out there, and hopefully it can help people, homeowners, understand how to deal with their insurance and their adjusters after a storm.
Now, it sounds like you're saying it's not just the public, but also you came across many professionals that maybe did not really have adequate training or really understand the field well enough. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's true. Just like any field, there's lousy doctors, there's lousy dentists, there's lousy waitresses, you run across that in every profession, and it's the same in adjusting. There are people that shouldn't be out here. There are people that are afraid to go on roofs, and in a hurricane, you have to go up on a roof. So it was disappointing to run across a lot of, for somebody of what I consider my abilities, to see the quality of some of the work that was out there was very disappointing.
Sure. Will, what I love about your book is so practical, and you cut right to the point. Even in chapter 1, you start by educating the audience and the readers, just some of these really basic terms that you're going to use throughout the whole book. Could you explain what a few of those basic terms are that you were introducing to the readers right from the beginning of this book?
Sure. Chapter 1 bites right into it with replacement cost value, which is the value of something today. If you go out to the hardware store and buy a sheet of plywood for $45, that's what it costs today. That's replacement cost value. So when you have damage from a hurricane, then the adjuster applies depreciation to that. It may be 10 years old, let's say. So it's used up most of its life as a sheet of plywood. So now it's only worth $5 instead of $45. So the depreciation is applied, and what's left, $5, is now the actual cash value of what that product is. So if you have an RCV, replacement cost value policy, then that $40 is recoverable. Once you replace that piece of plywood, you take a picture of it, you send it into the insurance company, which is called a supplement, and they send the other $40 back, and you're basically made whole. But if you have an actual cash value policy, then that $40 is non-recoverable depreciation. So all you're going to get is that $5, and that's it.
Well, these seems like incredibly different policies. I would imagine, I have so many questions for you. For one, when you look nationwide, if you had to estimate what percentage or what proportion of policies that people hold are RCV versus ACV?
Excuse me. Well, that all depends on location. So in the book, in hurricane country, it's kind of defined as 300 miles inland along the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast. So once you get in past that towards the Midwest or the West, you don't have hurricanes, so you don't really have ACV policies as much. So it's mostly along the coast and the Gulf Coast that are affected by hurricanes that give you the two policies, RCV and ACV. Insurance companies do that because obviously they don't want to pay out as much money when things are damaged possibly year after year after year.
Well, I would imagine in general, your ACV policies would be much lower premiums, right? Much cheaper to sign up for because the payout is so much lower. Do you find a lot of times people just focusing on, I want the lowest premium, I just want the cheapest thing out there, and then post-storm they realize, hang on a second, maybe this wasn't such a good decision?
You're exactly right. And a lot of people want to, especially if you live in hurricane country and you buy a house and all of a sudden your insurance is $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a year, you try and do whatever you can to reduce that cost because that's probably going on to your mortgage. And so a lot of people pick an ACV policy for that reason, because it is cheaper. They don't realize the effect that's going to have on them down in the future if they are affected by a hurricane. And that's what this book is hopefully can do. And the other problem is there's a lot of agents that really don't know that difference either. They just want to sell you a policy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. A friend of mine that's worked in insurance for over 30 years, he has this phrase. He says, people want Tiffany level service and coverage for a Walmart price. I mean, right? People want this amazing coverage when it happens and service, but they're all focused on, year in, year out, how can I pay the absolute cheapest?
That's
it
exactly
sounds like you're saying it doesn't always match up that way. You could pay a lot less per year, but really regret that if you get hit by a big storm.
Correct. An RCV policy, it might cost you if you're able to get one. Not everybody can get one. Like a lot of manufactured homes are offered only an ACV policy, and that's it. But if you have a regular brick and mortar home, and you can get an RCV policy, it may cost you an extra $100 a year, but one hurricane could save you. That RCV policy could save you $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000.
So before we go over to Bill, I know Bill's going to have a lot of questions for you. The last question I wanted to ask you about this, Will, in general, if people come to you and say, hey, what should I get, an RCV or an ACV? In general, will you direct them towards an RCV, or does that really depend on what the premium is as well?
Well, I would always direct somebody towards an RCV policy because that is intended to make you whole after damages. So that's what you want to do. You want to be put back to the way you were and not just halfway there. As I mentioned it to you in an email the other day, it's like having a flat tire and only replacing it with half the amount of air that you need to drive on. It's not going to help you much. So you want a tire that's filled fully with air. You want a house that's completely back to the way it was before the storm. And that's the whole intent. And a good adjuster, that's what he wants to do, is to make everything as seamless as possible to get you back to where you were before the storm.
Well, I'd imagine your better insurance agents too are understanding this and explaining it really well to their clients. So at least even if they choose an ACV, maybe at least they're making an informed decision and making a logical choice. Even if they disagree with it, at least they weren't blindsided by saying, oh, I didn't even know there's a difference between RCV and ACV.
Correct. Hopefully they're getting that description from their agent. And there are a lot of it, probably the majority of agents know what to tell their homeowners about the policies, and they can explain them.
Thanks, Will. Bill, I can see you there chomping at the bit. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions about this. It's so practical. I'm sure it relates to a lot of us here on the show, and for you and your community up there in League City, Texas as well.
Yeah, I know quite a few insurance agents currently and in the past, and they're all from this part of the world, and they've all been adamant to get the replacement value. And their advice on the pricing is to figure out how much can you stomach to pay out front, and maybe if you can handle, say, $5,000 or $10,000 worth of the damage, you change your deductible, and that might lower your rate. I don't know if that's still valid, but that's one of the things that is going on. Will, the interesting. I really liked your discussion on the roofing, and I've always been a little bit confused as to when you're estimating the damages to a roof. Say it's a 20-year-old roof, and the building codes have changed. Does the claim address that issue of you can't replace it with a roof exactly like you had before? You have to upgrade it.
Well, that all depends on if you have an endorsement on your policy. An endorsement is like, if you think of the U.S. Constitution as your policy and amendments to the Constitution as endorsements, it's an added thing that either adds or takes away coverage from your policy. So an endorsement of law and ordinance, it's called generally, covers upgrades that due to new building codes, new products, new laws that are put in place as far as construction goes. So if you have that policy, then those items are covered. If you don't have that endorsement, I should say, if you have that endorsement, those items are covered. If you don't have that endorsement, then those upgrades are going to be coming out of your pocket. I
see. I can imagine that gets somewhat controversial for the homeowners.
Yes, it does.
I get questions a lot when I give hurricane talks about, okay, the hurricane is hit. I've got all these damages out here. Can I start repairing them right away, or do I have to wait for the adjuster? What's your advice on that?
My advice is, they're given bad advice actually by the insurance company a lot of times when people call in their claim and are told, don't do anything until your adjuster gets there, which is about one of the worst things that you can do. You have to go ahead and start cleaning up what's called the mitigation process, tearing out wet walls, covering up damaged areas with tarps on the roof, all that sort of stuff that needs to be done, cutting down trees, getting trees off roofs, clearing out the debris, so that when the adjuster gets there, because it may be 3-4 weeks before an adjuster gets there, depending on how many claims they're given up front. So if you have damage to your roof and water comes in and it gets behind a wall and it's 4 weeks before an adjuster gets there, those walls are shot because they're full of mold and everything that's in there, and everything has to be replaced. And most policies say up front that you have to do whatever is possible to mitigate future losses from damage. So yes, please do whatever is necessary. Take a lot of pictures. An adjuster can always look at pictures and see what it looked like beforehand. The other thing is, especially to meet with the homeowner and go over things, because the adjuster wasn't there beforehand. They've never seen your house before. They don't know what was there. The homeowner knows everything that was there and is now missing. So he has his list. The homeowner has their list of everything that's missing, everything that's damaged. And the adjuster comes by and he goes and he takes a look at everything. And then you sit down and you compare lists and make sure that everything is covered.
Right. And I suppose the same advice on the contents. If they've gotten waterlogged and all, and you need to get rid of them, take the picture and then take it out.
Take pictures. If it's any kind of electronic thing that has a serial number and a model number, the insurance companies always want to see photos of that. Then yes, take a picture of it, model number, serial number, put it out by the curb, toss it in the dumpster, whatever. If you already replaced it, a lot of times a refrigerator or a freezer that gets damaged will need to be replaced right away so that you have food. and keep the receipts so that you can turn those into the insurance company, give them to your adjuster, and be compensated for all those losses.
Guys, if I could jump in real quick, Will, is there wisdom on leaving damaged contents that if you have contents coverage, is there wisdom on removing them from the house, but maybe leaving them on property? I mean, or is it enough just to have those serial numbers, photographs, and is that enough?
Serial numbers and photographs are generally good enough, but in my experience, a lot of times the adjuster has been there before all that stuff has been picked up from the street, because every house has a pile of debris in front of it. And by the time the city gets around to coming around and picking all that stuff up, the adjuster's already been there, and they can take a look at that pile. I've taken plenty of pictures of a debris pile of certain pieces of furniture or whatever electronics that are in a debris pile that are piled out front of the house.
Yeah, we mucked out a house for a friend when it was flooded during Harvey, and we tried to keep the content items in a separate pile, and the wet sheetrock and other building materials in another one. And
yep.
The guy told me his adjuster was very appreciative of that.
It does make a difference, in this type of thing. Reading the book gives you an idea of how to keep things separate, the different coverages, coverage A for the dwelling and coverage B for other structures and coverage C for contents, so that you know that there's different things that are covered under different parts of the policy. And keeping those separate makes everything much easier for the adjuster.
Right. I noticed you pointed out that you don't cover the flooding from the ground up that's covered by flood insurance. Who does the adjusting for the flood insurance program?
Who does the what? Pardon?
Since apparently you guys you do the windstorm aspect of the damage. Oh. Who does the adjusting for NFIP, for example?
It's just, you just have to be experienced enough. It's either 3 or 5 years to be able to get licensed by the NFIP to do flood insurance, to do flood adjusting.
Okay.
So I did do flood adjusting. I did not care for it. There's a lot of adjusters that would rather do that than climb on a roof. They'd rather climb in a crawl space than walk on a roof. So I'd rather do the opposite. So I stuck with more of the wind damage than flood damage.
Yeah. If I wasn't so lack of balance, I'd be the same way. I don't really want to meet a water moccasin under my building.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about RCV policies and how they take into account depreciation. So what happens if the RCV insurance software says, oh, a piece of plywood is going to be $45, and then someone goes down to the hardware store and they find out with all this inflation, it's actually $55. I mean, with inflation and the cost of things changing, how often are those software updated, and are they usually pretty close to what you're actually finding on the ground?
Well, the software is generally updated on a monthly basis. As an adjuster, you have to download a new price list every month for whatever zip code you're in. I have seen a couple times where they have updated things on the half month. So on the 15th, you'll get a notice to download a new price list. And it's only happened a few times. The prices are basically from the month before. Hurricane hits in October. The prices on the software are from September. The insurance company knows that prices skyrocket after a hurricane. So they have no problem paying $55 for that sheet of plywood, as long as you have a receipt for it and this is what you paid. That again is a supplement. Send it in with the photo and they'll reimburse that. They understand that prices go crazy.
Kind of a
Yeah.
side question. Have you ever seen insurance companies actually bring in materials saying like, this is insane what they're charging at the local hardware store in this coastal town that got decimated? Are there ways that additional materials are brought in, or is it just pretty much you're looking at what it would be at the local hardware store?
You're looking at what it would be at the local hardware store. Yeah, I've never heard of a company bringing any kind of any materials in, any insurance company bringing materials in to try and save prices. I don't think it would be that cost effective to try and do that.
It's so overwhelming, right? So many thousands of houses are impacted. Even how much supplies could you bring in? I don't think, like you said, it would make much of a difference.
Yeah.
One of the questions that someone asked me at a conference I was at is, and it was about, there was a training thing for adjusters, but the question I was asked offline was, how do you handle, you're contracted by an insurance company, so you do all the work on the adjusting and the claim is made, and they come back and have a very different and lower number than that. How do you work through mediating that difference?
I think you mean like where my estimate would be much lower than the contractor's estimate?
No, your estimate, you make your estimate, it goes back to the insurance company.
Okay.
And then they come back with a much lower, they adjust that downward for whatever reason. How do you mediate those differences, or do you?
Well, it doesn't happen too often. They might deny that part of the, I might, my philosophy is when I write an estimate to try and get as much as possible for the insured to help them offset what is most likely a very large deductible. I've seen deductibles up to $20,000. So in order to do that, I include everything that I can. Maybe even some things that I'm not sure will be covered actually by insurance. And I'll let the insurance company send it back to me and say, we're not going to cover this, take it out of the estimate. So once I do that, there are other items that I will, as you learn over the years, the correct wording gets something covered that might not be covered. So I don't want to give any specific examples of that, but there are certain phrases that you can put into your report that this is why I'm covering this, because this is how it was damaged. And the insurance company says, okay, that makes sense, so we'll cover it.
That's great. I hope that most adjusters think that way. That's because the homeowners, it's a one-time only thing for most of us. When we get a big event like that, we're not going to be savvy on this stuff.
Correct.
I think your book is almost a must-have thing to have in your hurricane kit, so that you can bone up on it when the event actually does occur, and you'd be a step ahead of where you would have been.
I appreciate that, and that was the whole intent. The website hurricanecountry.com, where you can buy the book, is there's no advertising, there's no pop-ups, there's no collecting of cookies or anything like that, because that's not what I'm about. I just want to help people by getting this book out there.
Good
That's
deal.
cool.
We've got a couple of questions here coming in online. I want to get those in quickly, and I think you just answered one of them. They wanted to know where the book is available for purchase, so if you want to tell them that one more time.
Yeah, it's hurricanecountry.com. It's all, no spaces or anything else in there, just hurricanecountry.com. And it's only 4 pages. There's the main page, which describes a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. There's a little page with my photo and like my bio, and another page to purchase, and that's about it.
How many pages is the book now?
The book is about 63 pages, and that includes about 3 pages of glossary. So, because there's a lot of terms that nobody's ever heard of in insurance, and this will describes everything that's in the back. You also have a glossary like that in your policy, That's why it's, nowadays you can get all this stuff online, your policies online, and you can search through it to find all these terms and look things up. And it's very, very beneficial to be able to get that online.
Fantastic. Got one more question. It says, how does the insurance crisis in Florida factor into the availability of RCV policies?
Well, that's more of a insurance company question, but from what I've seen and heard, and working, that there's getting to be fewer and fewer RCV policies, or even the option to purchase one. You have to do a lot of shopping around and trying to find, go to a lot of agents and find out what they cover, and make good ideas to read through the book, make a list of the things that you want to make sure that you're covered. If you have a lanai, you want to make sure you got a lanai that's, coverage that's going to cover your lanai or your swimming pool or your tiki bar. You want to make sure those things that are covered, and you want to make sure that try and make sure that they're covered at replacement cost value. So it's all about shopping around and trying to find the right policy for you.
Thank you. Bill, back to you.
I think I've covered all my questions for now. Will, I really like this book. I think I'll add this when I give hurricane preparedness talks, I have a list of references, and I'm going to add your book to that reference, because that's down here. That's something people need to know.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well,
I did work Hurricane Harvey down there too. In San Antonio, I did a couple of Hurricane Harvey claims in San Antonio.
Yeah, that was
before going over to Houston.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question. If you go into a hurricane disaster zone, you're probably doing dozens of claims. In general, what's going to be the number one regret or mistake that you're going to see insurance policyholders have as you're working all these claims in a disaster zone? Is there one thing you hear a lot more than others?
Mostly like Hurricane Ian. I think almost everything I did, well, not everything, but most of my claims were manufactured homes. Manufactured homes in Florida are pretty much only ACV, and that's it. So a person that, one lady, she bought her manufactured home from a family member for like $280,000. She had I wrote up an estimate for about $120,000 worth of damage. And her policy, because it's an actual cash value, and it's based on a manufactured home, a mobile home, the original cost of that, her coverage was $70,000. So that's $50,000 out of her pocket. And she basically paid 4 times what the value of that house was worth.
Wow. So good example there of not anywhere near being made whole.
Correct. And her opinion was, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm moving. So, which I think after Ian is going to happen a lot. That probably happened a lot down there.
Well, I wanted to ask you some broader questions about being a insurance adjuster, being working in claims. So you've obviously worked claims in all these different states. How does that work to get licensed to work in these different states? Do you actually have to do a test or something in each state, or can you do one test and then you're approved for many states?
Well, you can do, what I did was I originally got my license in Texas. I have a Texas license, and that's they have reciprocity, and make sure I get that term right, reciprocity with most other states, so that you don't have to go and take a test again in any other state. You can just say, here's my Texas license, and you pay for a license in that state, and you get it. Florida is a little bit different. You have to go through a few other hoops, but basically because you have the Texas license, you don't have to take the test again. Not all states, you don't need a license to be an adjuster in all states. Most of the Gulf states, Atlantic coast states, yes, you do. You get towards the Midwest, my hometown, my home state, Wisconsin. You don't need a license there. So, but
Well, for example,
calls,
in Texas, when you get a license, I'm just throwing that out there because that's where it sounds like you went through your first license. Like, what does the test look like? Is it mostly on paper? Do you actually, go out into the field? Is there a field component as well?
well, when I did mine, of course, this is 20 years ago. There was no field component at that time. I'm pretty sure there isn't now because you can do it online. You don't even have to go. I had to go down to Dallas, and I was in a conference room, actually more of a large center. There was probably 300-400 people in there to take. You spend four days going over the policy, all the coverages, everything, and then you spend 1 day taking the test, and it's a written test, and hopefully you pass.
Yeah, that's interesting. Will, I wanted to ask you one last question about just life of someone working claims. It seems like claims for natural disasters can be kind of feast or famine, right? I mean, all of a sudden you get a Hurricane Ian or a Harvey, there could be months of more work than you could, touch. And then all of a sudden you may have 9 months or 15 months where things are pretty quiet. How do a lot of adjusters deal with that? Will they have other jobs? Will they work, a main job and then do adjusting on the side? Or how does that work for a lot of people in the field?
Well, usually most, when you have a storm like that, most adjusters are coming in from someplace else. I would come down to Florida, or, for Sally, it was down to Alabama, and from Wisconsin. But when I'm back in Wisconsin, I'm doing what's called daily claims up there. So I have a dozen or more companies that I'm contracted with, that somebody has a broken water heater and causes damage in the basement, or there's a hailstorm and I have to go look at damaged roofs, hail damaged roofs. So you get plenty of work. At least I did. I got plenty of work back in Wisconsin to keep me busy. And the hurricanes were 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. And I enjoyed it a lot. I like that because within 1 month, I'm working 3 months worth of hours, 3 to 4 months worth of hours, if you figure at 40 hours a week. So if I take another month or two off after that, I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's this excessive amount of work in a short window. And then, like you said, you can take some time off afterwards. I think those are all the questions I had for you, Will. Bill or Alex, do you have any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay, well, I think we're good here. And Will, if you could tell them one more time where they can pick up the book, I think we can close this out.
Okay, well, it's hurricanecountry.com. It's only $9.99, and even if you evacuate and you're not hit by a hurricane and you come back, you can that book will save you more than $9.99. So it's pretty easy to get your money back out of that book. Hurricanecountry.com. I want to thank Bill and Hal and Alex, and I appreciate you getting me on here and letting me promote my book.
No problem. We enjoyed having you today. Bill and Hal, any last words?
Let's hope we don't have any more Otises in our future.
This is true.
Yeah.
Well, what I like what you did here, it's just so practical, right? And it's just to the point. I mean, even you start off by just educating us right from chapter 1 on these major terminology that everyone should really know. So anyway, just reading over it, for me, I learned a lot. And I think a lot of our listeners that are going to order your book will get a lot out of it. Thanks for coming on the broadcast today.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. And want to make sure that we go back and tell you it's all these wonderful people that you see up here. USAA, South Padre Island, the Weather Company, and the Weather Boy. They make this program possible, along with our friends at Black Magic Design. It's all powered by them. We appreciate you joining us. We're going to take a little bit of a break during the month of November. We'll be back for our next show on December the 6th. It'll be a big wrap-up of the latest hurricane season. Until then, enjoy, and we'll be back then. Have a great, great day. We hope you enjoyed this episode of NTWC Live Hurricane Center Podcast. If you did, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. And join us next week. This is NTWC Live.